and go and make right. And then you come back and you make your offering. So that obviously means a great deal of importance if we are not in full fellowship together. It's a month of opportunity as we prepare for the time we get to spend with God, as we prepare for Yom Kippur. We take this time just to get right with our neighbor, with our families. And then once Yom Teruah happens, we take 10 days to get right with God. All the wonderful things that we might have skipped on this year. Okay? If you've got any questions, feel free to come and chat to me afterwards. I'm just going to bracha for those who weren't here in the first session. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher natan Torah. Amen. Okay. In the life of Peter. So just a very quick recap because your brains were all fried. He was the brother of Andrew. He was a fisherman. He was born in Bethsaida, then moved to Capernaum. He was married. He was one of the closest three. Peter had a tendency to speak first and think later. He was one of the first called. His name was Shimon. Yeshua gave him the nickname Petrus or Kepha, both meaning rock or stone. He walked on water. Why did he walk on water? Shortened version. He wanted to be like his rabbi. And then we got stuck at a place called Banias or Panias. Okay? Scroll down for me, my dear. Sea of Galilee, Capernaum, synagogue in Capernaum, ancient boat. Go down. Caesarea Philippi. Okay? We read that this place, the Caesarea of Philip, and we know that this was not a nice place because we had the gates of Hades, which was where the water came from, the temple of Augustus declaring he's greatest god. Yeah, he gets the biggest platform. Pan, the grotto of Pan, temple to Zeus, port or area for Nemesis, the Roman god of vengeance. And Yeshua takes his disciples and he gives them their final exam. Who do you say that I am? Right? And what did they say? Some believe you are? Jeremiah, Elijah, John the Baptist. And it's right? Yeah. You're the Messiah, Son of God. The Messiah of God, if you take it into the Hebrew. Okay? And you get to the way he gives him the authority. And he says, whatever you bind or loose, what did we find that meant? Right? Whatever you allow and whatever you don't allow. And we saw that. I took you into a portion in Acts 15, where as the Gentiles were coming into the understanding, they said, look, this is the basis for entering our congregations. There will be 4 things that you will be allowed to, should do and you shouldn't do. And that was all based in Torah because you were going to take a time of process and going through this. He was talking about halakha. He was not talking about spiritual warfare. Very important. The gates of Hades, he says, even the gates of Hades will not stand. How did we see that fulfilled?
The water moving.
Okay, remember we said this was the gates of Hades. And he says, on this rock I will build my church. I told you before there's not a rock here, or there's not a church here, but if you go further down, a Byzantine church was found. But that's not what he was talking about. Can you scroll down for me? Okay, that is the rock that we see today. The water is actually coming out straight from underneath the ground. Go again. All right, that's close up of the water. Grotto of Pan again. Carry on. Again. That's Pan, half man, half goat. Nice guy. Again. Again. Caesarea Maritima. There's a lovely link. The Caesarea of Philippi and the Caesarea of Maritima. Is this in your way? No, can't. Okay. Caesarea Maritima is a cosmopolitan city. And in that cosmopolitan city, mainly Hellenistic ideas. What do I mean by Hellenism? Greek, right? So Greeks don't call themselves Greeks. When you go to Greece, they identify themselves with a different name. They are from Hellas, Hellenism. All right? Hellenism is making them Greek. Romans understood this and they said, I'm gonna civilize you. The word servitas is where we get civilization from. What it means, I'm gonna make you Rome-like. Now, because Herod the Great got into the pocket of, he had a couple of things that he needed to do, and part of it was to give them a base of operations, part of it was to give them temple tax, part of it was about establishing Roman life in the midst of Judea. So what we have is we have horse racing, the king's sport, the top sport that we have. And in the midst of that, when you walk into this area here, just on the side, you see what we call the king's seat. That was where Caesar stood. So when you came before you raced your horses, who do you salute? Whoever your God is. Who you're running for. I have run the good. I have fought the good. He used Roman. He left from Maritima, ironically enough, he was also locked up here for a time. But he went out on some of his mission trips through this very port. It's a man-made port. He uses Roman infrastructure. He uses Herod's audacity to build out and build for himself to expand God's kingdom. Love it. This is also the place, for interest's sake, when we questioned whether Pontius Pilate was a real person. When you walk in here, you find a little stone just before you enter the palace complex. About here, you see a stone. The replica is about yay big. Others in the museum, it says commemoration to a man called Pontius Pilatus. And all the naysayers that said he doesn't exist because we don't have any record of him anywhere in it, except in the Bible, all of a sudden went, he's a real person. Why? Because archaeologically proves that the Bible is obviously true, right? There should be something wrong with my statement. Did you pick it up? The Bible is true. Archaeology reaffirms. Archaeology does not make the Bible true. It just adds to it. Don't get stuck, because if you focus only on the archaeology, you're going to have a really rough time proving everything that you see in the Word. All right? But God allows these fantastic discoveries to happen every so often. Now, he said, even the gates of Hades will not stand. In Acts 10, we meet a guy praying from this area. What's his name? Cornelius. What happened in Acts 9? Acts 9, Peter has a vision. Unclean things, eat. He says, no thanks, never done that. Later he gets called, the Roman called after the crucifixion of the rabbi of their Mashiach. Would a good Jew follow? Not unless God told him to, and that's what he had to do. And he sent him off. And he says, it's okay, my boy, I got you, go with him. And he finds out that Cornelius, that God told Cornelius that he says, I've got my mind on you. Such a powerful statement. And he says, I've seen your good works. I've seen what you're doing. He's praying at 3 o'clock towards the temple. In his mind and everybody else's mind, this Gentile has got no right to the people or to the temple. In fact, there's a wonderful little balustrade that runs around the temple where they have the court of the Gentiles, and it says, if you cross this, you die. Vincent paraphrase version. We have that. This place is for the Jews. Gentiles, we never see that anywhere else. We don't see that in the Mishkan. We don't see that in Solomon's temple. But it was a man-made thing to keep the unclean out. Was that man unclean? No, he was a God-fearing man. God loved him enough to send a man to go and talk to him about the Yeshua. And I know I jumped the gun again. I said the Holy Spirit was poured out here, somewhere in the city. And a man and his entire household received the Holy Spirit. The first time a Gentile receives the Holy Spirit. In a place where Paul ventures out to go and save people. Peter knocks on the gates of Hades. The rabbis called any Gentile city the gates of Hades. And he says, the gates of Hades will not stand. This becomes a believer's area. Soon after, we see that fulfillment through Peter's life. Is that all right? Any questions you might have had or any gaps I missed? Spoke too much information in your head last week, kind of filled in the gaps? Hope so. All right? So we jumped a little bit of ahead. And I want you to go through to Matthew 17 for me. You can scroll down for me, dear. Again. All right, just before, while you're getting to Matthew 17, 10 points for you could tell me what this is. No one that's actually been to Israel, shush. Yeah, it's not my fault. No, it's not. I wish it was. It's a water what? Water transportation, otherwise known as, it's an aqueduct. Okay? This aqueduct doesn't focus on these little things. This was actually to lift it up, and the water used to travel on top. Now, a couple of years ago, this was all covered by sand, and they actually dug it out to show you how big this aqueduct was. To give you a little indication of how elite Caesarea Maritima was, is that they actually had sewage channels that the ocean used to come in and wash out in high tide. They had running water. The aqueduct ran all the way through to where? Those in Israel. Yeah, they're not Mount Hermon. There was a little man who, huh? Yes, Elijah's mountain, which was? Carmel. All right. And Mount Carmel would bring fresh water all the way in here. The theater was designed in such a way that the wind that came off the Mediterranean would carry the voices so that they wouldn't have to speak. They still use that concert hall today. Okay? Slightly restored, but a lovely place. Okay, go back one. This is Mount Carmel. You might notice one or two faces in this picture. Okay, we were sitting on top and we were talking about the story of Elijah. Now, why would I put that there, linking an aqueduct and Matthew 17? Has that got anything to do with anything?
Elijah was on that mountain and he was tasting the spirit of.
He wasn't testing, he was challenging. Okay? Think about it. Yeshua takes him up to Banias again and he says, who do you say that I am? He says, you are Elijah. Now, Elijah on this mountain, somewhere on this mountain range, is quite big. He pulled up 450 prophets of Baal, 400 prophets or priestesses of Asherah, and he brings them up and he says, all right, you make your offering, I'll do mine, and let's see, whoever God answers, that's God, right? Now, you've got to have a lot of faith in your God that he's going to answer, because you're risking a very big statement here. And we see the prophets of Baal, they build an altar, they cut themselves, they scream, there's blood everywhere, and they cried for a really long time, and all Elijah can do is become cheeky. Scream louder, he can't hear you. Maybe he's busy. In Hebrew, maybe he's on the potty. Scream louder, let him hear you. And we know the story, nothing there. So Elijah comes to about 3 o'clock. Isn't that interesting? Cornelius was praying at 3 o'clock. And he comes over and he says, he doesn't make a new altar, he repairs an old one. And he takes buckets of water, 3 buckets if I remember correctly, please check me, don't check the story. And he mikvahs the stones after he cuts his meat 4 times. 3 times 4 is 12. I will wash away the sins of the 12 tribes. Until eventually the water is all poured up. And then he goes, Father, Vincent paraphrase version, today they will know that there is a God in Israel. Please answer my prayer. And fire fell from heaven and it took up the offering, took up the water, and it says it even licked the stones. 4 buckets of water. Thank you. 1 Kings?
1 Kings 18.
1 Kings 18. Okay? So 4 buckets of water 3 times still gives us 12, and God answers and he says, I accept this offering and I'm going to sort this out. Elijah then goes off and he slaughters all the prophets of Baal. And then what happens? Okay, he looks for rain, and because there was no rainfall, yeah, just over 3 years, because he prayed. Said, Lord, don't give them blessing because they're not walking with you. Long story short, after they bring the rain and King Ahab comes up and he tells Jezebel, you won't believe what I saw and what happened, and it's so exciting. And instead of changing her heart, she goes, I'm going to send Elijah a little message. Far be it from me if you're not like the prophets of Baal by this time tomorrow. Now, if you were a prophet, do you think that would encourage you or dishearten you? Like, we've challenged your God. You've gotten everyone here. We've got so many witnesses to that the only God who lives and restores is my God. What are you doing? And she goes, I ignore all your miracles. I ignore your issues. I'm going to carry on and I'm going to destroy you just like she always had did. Anyway, that has got nothing to do with Matthew 17, right? Maybe. Open Matthew 17 for me quickly. Right. So we go from Banyas. Okay? And who do you say that I am? And he gives them all this land and he says, anybody who gets embarrassed by me, I will be embarrassed by you. I love that little statement. Can you imagine Yeshua crying out to these bunch of pagan people, lose your life, take up your cross and follow me? And they're like, yay, the wrong audience, maybe. And he says, if you're ashamed of me, I will be ashamed of you. You stand up here and you tell them truth. Right? Yeshua was willing to lay down his life for those very people. That happens not long after this. But before he does, he says 6 days later, Yeshua took Kepha, Peter, Yaakov, and his brother Yochanan, the three that are generally quite close to him, and led them up onto a high mountain privately. Next slide, please. All right, you see this lovely snow-capped mountain here? All right. Where Banyas is at the base of that mountain. All right? I believe this is more likely the location to the Mount of Transfiguration. Some people believe it's on the other side of on the Galilee. If you're sitting where the exit of it is, or the southern point of the Sea of Galilee, it's on your left-hand side, very close to Tiberias. Not a place that Yeshua frequented. Why didn't Yeshua really go into Tiberias? Right, it was actually built on a graveyard. Clean, unclean? Unclean. Definitely not a place for us. Named after Tiberius Caesar. Not a happy place. Okay? So I believe he was more up here in the northern region. Banyas is about here. You carry on up and you go walkies up. And you go through a village where they've got lovely skis as a symbol that you're entering a snow-capped mountain. This photo was taken in April. Winter had left, but yet we still have snow. Okay, March even more so, and pretty much snow-capped for like 6 months, 7 months out of the year. A lot of fresh water comes from the melting snow in the Hermon that joins up with those tributaries that run into the Jordan River. Okay, what created that storm was the cold air from here coming to the hot air in the valley by where the Sea of Galilee is. Creates lots of wind, it creates waves. All right? Sometimes up to 6 foot. All right, little fishing boat, big problem. Anyway, this gets transformed once a year. It is barren and then it becomes pure white. So I follow the imagery. I believe this is where it is. I can't prove it to you 100%, but I thought I'd show you. It says, they watched and he began to change form. His face shone like the sun and his clothing became white as light. Then they looked and they saw Moshe and Elijah, speaking with him. All right, let's pause there. Moses and Elijah are sitting with Yeshua on a mountain. We sort of figured out that Elijah's mountaintop moment was Carmel. Take on the gates of Hades, let's have a discussion. Moses? Mount Sinai. Okay? So at Mount Sinai, what happened to Moshe? Right, he went up to the mountain, he said, God, let me see your face. He said, dude, you're not going to survive. He covers him, puts him in the cleft of the rock, and he actually starts to glow. He's transformed. Funny enough, where did Elijah go to hear the voice of God? Mount Sinai. He goes to the mountain of God. And he said, after running from Jezebel, after showing this also, he says, you might as well kill me now because these people are never going to listen. The point of a prophet is to ring out God's instructions. If no one listens, why am I here? And I believe he goes to God and he says, well, you might as well take me. And we know that he was carried the fire. If you see the horses, he says to Elijah, if you see the horses, you know that what you ask of me, you will receive. And he wanted a double portion. I find that quite interesting. Because later we see in the ascension, we see Yeshua taken up, and the Holy Spirit allows us to do his work. Anyway, so he comes up and we've got this Moses and Elijah. Elijah, we can sort of understand, taking on the gates of Hades, taking on the prophets of Baal, going up against, pushing up against these Gentiles. But why is Moses sitting here in the synagogue? Deuteronomy 18 tells us that he says, there will become a prophet like me. And God will put his words in his mouth for me to listen to him. And here we see two amazing reaffirmations. We see his face glowing. We see him taking on the gods of his time. You say, Caesar is God, I say not. You say, Pan is God, I say he's nothing. You say, please, let's not even go there. He challenges all of them in one single shot, and he looks at his disciples and he says, now you tell me who I am. Because if you do not get this understanding, it's going to be very difficult for you to carry this message out into the world. You need to see this, you need to understand this. And he chooses Peter, Yaakov, and Yochanan to go up. The same John who wrote Revelations, who needed to see Yeshua in, who later saw Yeshua in the fullness of his glory in Revelations. So God is preparing them for something. He sees him transformed, sees him transfigured, he sees him changed. Peter said to Yeshua, it's good that we are here, Lord. I will put up 3, what does your translation say? Shelters, booths, Sukkot. The Feast of Tabernacles is the Feast of Sukkot. I will put it. Why would I put up 3 sukkahs on top of a mountain? Why would you need that? You're in the presence of God. That'll give you an indication. Plant that in the back of your mind. Listen. While he was still speaking, a bright cloud enveloped him, just like Mount Sinai. And a voice from the cloud said, this is my son whom I love, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. Now, when we break up those 3 portions, those of you who have been here for a while, from 3 different sections in the Bible. Okay? He quotes from Torah, Deuteronomy. He quotes from the Nevi'im, or the Navi. What is the Nevi'im? It's the prophets. Okay? 10 points if you can figure out which one that is. And the Ketuvim, which is the writings. This is my son. Listen to that prophet like Moses. I'll give you the second one. It's Psalm 2. This is my son, and I'm going to make all the enemies his footstool. In whom I am well pleased, I'm happy with. Fastest fingers first. Let's see what you come up with. This is interactive. You're supposed to do your homework. What have you got? Thank you, sir. Yo, Nick bailed you guys out there, huh? Isaiah 42. He pulls from 3 remezes. You need to go and read each one of these. The prophet whom God has chosen, his servant, his son. Envelops him with a cloud. So God reaffirms the entire Old Testament with 3 very quick statements. Where else did we see this? At his baptism. When the Talmidim heard this, they were frightened. They fell on their face down on the ground, but Yeshua came and touched them. Get up, he said, don't be afraid. So they opened their eyes, he looked up and only saw Yeshua himself. let me come back to you. Did anybody doubt that it was God speaking here? No. So why did we want to build a sukkah? It's a lot less. Right, because the last time we were mountain and people started glowing, he gave us the blueprint for a tabernacle. Yes? So we go down, we make a mishkan, and that present comes here. He sees Moses and Elijah, and he goes, it's all about God and all about the presence of God. So let's make Sukkot. Meanwhile, are we missing something? Yeshua flesh is the image of that Sukkot. It says, you will call him Emmanuel, God with us, and he will dwell with you. The word dwell is Sukkah. He is the tabernacle. I am the door. I am the light. I am the bread of life. No way. You know where you come to the Father except through him. Right? And that comes through the signs of the offering. That comes through prayer. That comes through mikvah. That comes through him standing in the very throne room of God at the mercy seat saying, you said, I'll pay the price, they're with me. Now you can walk boldly into the presence of the Most High. But to understand that this rabbi is so much more than the rabbi, we need to understand that there is a transformation that takes place. You're so much more than what you see. Even though Peter got the answer right, do you think the rest of the disciples understood completely what was going on? Probably not. So God takes it a step further and he says, I'm going to show you. I'm the one Moses spoke about. I'm the servant that was going to redeem Israel. I'm the one who all authority has been given to me, and that the enemies will come underneath the footstool. Don't worry. Don't be afraid. Yeshua knew he was going to die. He's been telling them for weeks, for months. He says, I'm going to go and die. Don't talk like that. In fact, at Banias, what did Peter say to him? Yeshua said, okay, well, I'm going to go and die now, and you do that. And Peter stands up and he says, don't you talk like that. It says Peter rebuked him. Now, 1 second, I want to be like my rabbi by walking on the water. The next second, I'm telling my rabbi he doesn't know what he's talking about. Don't speak the feet. And then one of the most extreme statements coming out of your rabbi's mouth, he looks at Peter and he tells him what? Get behind me, Satan. 1 second I'm the golden boy, and next second you're calling me Hasatan. I think that's a bit of a problem in my pride pocket. Says, you don't know the things of God, you only know the things of man. Peter, you might have got the answer right, but if you're telling me that I am not going to come here and die to save many, you do not understand why I've been here from the beginning. You want to understand how I'm going to take on the gates of Hades? First, I'm going to be strengthened. First, I'm going to be transformed. And then I'm going to go from the highest peak in the Galilee. Then I'm going to descend down, go all the way down, and we're going to start getting into the exciting stuff. Okay? The next setup we kind of see is in Luke 22, verse 7. So in Luke, they leave the Galilee region and then they start to get excited about Pesach. One or two of the other translations, when you talk at the Mount of Transfiguration, actually talk about, it says, he was talking to Moshe about the Exodus to come. Okay? So he talks about this thing and this plan of what it's really about, and Yeshua is going to come and do this. Luke 22 verse 7 says, then came the day of Matzah, on which the Passover lamb had to be killed. Yeshua sent Kepha and Yochanan, instructing them, go and prepare our Seder so that we can eat. They asked him, where do you want us to prepare it? He told them, as you're going into the city, a man carrying a jar of water will meet you Follow him into the house he enters and say to its owner, the rabbi says to you, where is the guest room where I am to eat the Pesach meal with my Talmidim? He will show you a large room upstairs, fully furnished. Make the preparations there. They went and they found the things just as Yeshua had told them, and they would be, and they prepared the Seder. So he entrusts Peter and Yochanan, John, to go and prepare this Passover meal. What is the identification marker? Who am I going to see? A man with a clay jar with water. Where else do we see a clay jar of water? At the wedding feast at Cana. Cana, he turned water into wine. What did we say about that? Tell me, Dim. Creak, creak. And not only was he reaffirming a marriage, but you can sum up Yeshua's entire ministry in that miracle. He came out in his public ministry, the water. Was that the mikvah, the baptism, yes? Wine, Pesach. Take of this cup and drink of it. It is the blood of the new covenant. You with me? So already he's setting up images that he already showed from the first one. From my earthly ministry, it started there, it's going to end here. But don't worry, it's not going to stop here. This is just what I need to do here on earth. You with me? He turned water into wine. So you take water and the pitcher of wine, and the wine is a symbol of the blood. Okay. So when he was baptized in the water, and the blood is the blood of the new covenant, he was talking about him, that he was going to die. Crucifixion again. What two things poured out of his side? Water and blood. The culmination of what it needs to be. Okay? Everybody with me up until that point? So, Peter and John go and they prepare this table. They're getting trusted. In the Gospels, you guys will remember a statement. They will say, they were arguing about who's the greatest in the kingdom. Nachon? You guys remember that? Okay? And they were arguing with it together. What were they really arguing about? No. Seating arrangements. At Passover, you sit at a table that looks like this. It's called a triclinium. And according to the order of who is the greatest and who is the least among you, you sit in a specific order. So we know that John reclined on Yeshua, yes? Now everybody would lean on the table on the left side, and then they would dip, and then they would go in, and they would actually recline on each other. Very close communion idea. Right? If I asked you guys to all recline on each other, most of you would be a little bit weirded out, yes? Oh yes, but we're all family and everything's fine. Discipleship was a very close-knit group. Okay. So we know that John reclined on him. So John was here because, according to tradition, Yeshua was given the seat of honor. That was the next seat. Who did he dip his in the bitter herbs with? Judas. So Judas was given a seat of honor over here, behind him. Where do we find Peter? Generally down here. How do I know that? Because when you're reclining on your left side, there's only so far you can turn your neck, and he had a conversation with Peter. John spoke to Peter because Peter asked him, who's he talking about? What's he saying? So they were probably within eye line near the end of the table. We could place him in one or two or three places there. Understand, it could possibly be this John and this guy, Peter, who set up the entire table, knowing we set up everything. Where are we going to sit? We're good, aren't we? Good, tell me, Dim. Where would you want to sit? Well, he just gave him a seat. I think Peter thought maybe Judas just got the seat, but he didn't set up the table. So he finds himself at the end. Why is that important? Because in John 13, verse 6, we hear this little debacle about Yeshua washing feet. Okay, go there quickly. John 13. Okay, I'm going to read from a little bit before. Yeshua was aware that the Father had put everything in his power. I'm reading from verse 3. And that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he rose from the table, removed his outer garments, and wrapped a towel around his waist. Then he poured some water into the basin and began to wash the feet of the Talmidim and wiped them off with the towel wrapped around him. Now, traditionally, whose job was it to wash people's feet? The least at the table. Now, Yeshua says, I'm going to teach you something. Although you call me rabbi, I come to serve. I do not come to lord over you. I'm going to give you the model which you need to follow. Guys, we need to remember this. If you're in any form of leadership, you're there so that you can serve your community, nothing less, nothing more. As God might call you great and he might lift you up and exalt you in whatever way, shape, or form, do not think of yourself as anything more. You are there to serve. That's your job. That's what you're supposed to be doing. Okay? So you can imagine by the time he gets to Peter, it's probably a little embarrassing because everybody knows that he's the one that probably has to be washing the feet. Said he came to Shimon Kepha and he said to him, Lord, you are washing my feet? Yeshua answered him, if you don't understand yet what I'm doing, but in time you will understand. They carry on this conversation from Banyas. And he says, no, said Peter, you will never wash my feet. Yeshua answered him, if I don't wash you, you will have no share with me. Mikvah. Lord, Shimon Kepha replied, not only my feet, but my hands and my head too. That sounds like Peter, right? I'm going to get shares if you let me do this. Done. In there. Wash everything. I'm the besterest disciple.
Well, now that you put it that way.
Yeah. Doesn't he? He reminds, when God wants us to do stuff, we get a little bit grumpy. When we get it right, we get a little bit arrogant, and then he has to bring us down a peg or two, and then we start to look for favors again. Guys, it's very interesting. Yeshua said to him, a man who has had a bath doesn't need to wash, except his feet. His body is already clean. And you people are clean, but not all of you. Verse 11, he says, he knew who was betraying him. This is why he said, not all of you are clean. And after he had washed the feet, taken back his clothes, and returned to the table, he said to them, do you understand what I have done to you? You called me Rabbi and Lord, and you are right, because I am. That's a big statement. I am. Remember the name study? Okay, when we're looking at the three statements, when he gives his name at Sinai, we have three different statements. All right, let me do it here. Haya, I was. Hove, I am. Yiyeh, I will be. It's a form of Eye. When he gives his name, the great Yud He Vav He, which we believe is pronounced Yehovah, is a statement all-encompassing. I was, I am, and I will be. Right? It's not just a name, it's function. I am from the beginning and I have no end. I have no separation. It is about time. He still makes a statement after Exodus 3:14, this will be my name forever. And there's a lovely little link that we found out, if you guys will give me a second to share this, that the word forever is le-olam. Okay? Now we have a letter dating back quite a way, I can't remember exactly, a discussion between two rabbis, two different scribes. And he says to the one, the one rabbi says to the other one, it says, you know that the vowel points or the vowels are the same in Le'olam as the same in God's name, Yud He Vav He. And then we have the response to the letter. The rabbi says, yes, but destroy the letter so that no one else knows, because they don't want the Gentiles to profane the name. Okay? We can understand that, right? In America, like OMG. Can you imagine if they actually understood the name? I mean, every time someone bumps their foot, don't they all of a sudden talk about Jesus very quickly? And it has nothing to do with him. If this is the way you act with holy things, why would I give you the holiest of them all? Now remember, names are always about function, it's about reputation. That's what Shem actually means. Get away from the idea of incantation where if I pronounce it wrong or say it wrong, then it nullifies everything. How do I know that? Because that's a Greek mindset, number one. Number two, most of the people were baptized under the name Jesus, yes? Were you still saved? Yes. Because it is about his salvation, it's about his reputation, it's about his name. The closer we get to him, he reveals more things, and we understand that Yeshua is more correct because it actually means salvation, not a transliterated name. Anyway, if we look at the great name, and we put it back into context of Yud, Hey, and we take the vowels, there, Lam, and we follow the advice of our good rabbis. And that's what you get. So when he makes a statement of I am, understand this is what he's saying. Before you were, I am. I was. I am here with you, and I will be forever. In Revelations, pops up in the same thing. You know, he says, I will show you things before, at that time, and what is to come. He's revealing his plan the whole way through. Okay? So, little side note, but this is the statement that he is. And he talks about washing the feet, and Yeshua gets all excited. They celebrate the Pesach. Peter ends up washing feet. Okay, now go to Matthew 26 for me. Are you guys still okay? All right, I think you can go to the next slide. All right, Matthew 26. Can anybody tell me what that is? All right, it's a really big olive tree. Okay, this is what they call the Garden of Gethsemane today. You'll notice we have pretty little flowers. I don't know if you can see it. It's not that clear. And we've got little flower beds running through. The reason that's called the Garden of Gethsemane is because when people went over there and they said, where's the garden? And all they saw was olive trees. The church decided to plant pretty flowers so that people wouldn't get too confused. Okay? When you look at that top of the mountain on the Mount of Olives, the Garden of Gethsemane, Gat Shemen, next picture. This is a Gat Shemen. Okay, it is a press, the garden of the pressing of oil, Shemen, Gat Shemani, right? So, go back one. So what you would have is you would have your olive tree. You would beat it or you would pluck it, you would take them out, and you would put your olives in little bags. Go back to the previous one. All right, before we get there, we put all our olives in this thing. This here is called a yam. It's the same word they use for sea. Okay? Not a lot of water in Israel, so we don't get a lot of different descriptions of it. It's a body of water, it's a body of water, it's a body of water. Basin. Holds water. Doesn't matter, it's called a yam. Anybody tell me what this thing here is? It's a millstone. Right. So when Yeshua tells you, and he says, if you make one of these little ones stumble, it's better for you to take a millstone, tie it around the neck, and go jump into the ocean. Do you get his understanding now? You won't even be able to carry that thing around your neck. There is no chance of you coming back once you're in that water. Do you think he takes making little ones stumble quite seriously. Right. What that tells you is, don't terrorize little children, but if a new believer comes into the midst, you be very nice. God fought long and hard to get them to understanding and to get them to a place of giving their life. Be gentle. Lead them. Guide them. Love them when they make mistakes. Because if you make it too hard for them and they turn back, He's going to hold you accountable. Nice warning, eh? Anyway, so He comes in, and after these are crushed, I would take them and they would put them in bags, and they would put them on this side. Now, this is more of an olive press factory scenario. The other ones they use is a bit of a turnkey, a screw scenario underneath. They would pack the bags all on top of each other, and then they would put the log, just the weight of the log, in a basin, a hole in the ground, and what you would do is you would pour water in, the oil would come in, you would scoop up the top, that would be your first pressing. Okay? Afterwards, you would add a gut shemen, an olive press stone, and this, you would link up to that to get more pressure. You get 3 pressings. Yeshua prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane 3 times. It's about the olives. What does Mashiach mean? Anointed one. What do we anoint with? The first pressing olive oil. And He was pressed, taking on the weight of our sins, until it said He sweated like drops of blood. And while He was praying and going through this, what were the disciples doing? Sleeping. Enter Peter sleeping on the Mount of Olives with a sword. Okay? So what we have is we have them falling asleep in Matthew 26, verse 37. And then we see a little interesting little interlude. Go to Luke 22. Oh, wait. Let's make it John 18. 22 tells the same story. Sorry, man. John 18. Go to John 18, verse 10. Okay. I'm going to read from verse 2. Now Judas, Yehuda, was betraying Him, also knew this place because Yeshua had met there often with His Talmidim. So Yehuda went, taking with him a detachment of Roman soldiers and some temple guards provided by the head Kohanim and the Pharisees, the Parushim. They carried weapons, lanterns, torches. Yeshua, who knew everything that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, "Who do you want?" Yeshua from Nazareth. Remember what it said? Go back one slide. In Netzer is a shoot that comes out of the stump. I don't know if you can see it all that clear in this one, but this trunk gets so big that it's actually split into 4 pieces. Right? If you look in the backyard, this little tree has as many foliage, but it takes up half the space as this one. This is a 2,000-year-old olive tree. Okay? Very little fruit. I could get the same amount of fruit from something that small. I would chop it, a new shoot would come up, known as the tree of resurrection, because it survived this. And then this new shoot would come out, and they would call that a netzer. That netzer would start to bring forth from this massive root system fruit very quickly. Okay? Yeshua is the netzer. He is the shoot from Netzeret. In the place of the olives, He brings in this idea. They answered, He said to them, "I am." Isn't that an interesting? Again, He comes back to the statement. Also standing with them was Yehuda, one of those betraying Him. When He said, "I am," they went backward, fell from Him, and fell to the ground. Why did they fall to the ground? Because in their mind, He was blaspheming. Not because of the power or the statement. He said, "I am" a few times already. No one fell over. It was because He was making a statement comparing Himself to God. That's blasphemy if you're looking at a man. But if it is the Son of God, it's a statement. So he inquired of them once more, who do you want? And they said, Yeshua min Netzeret. I told you, I am, answered Yeshua. So if I'm the one you want, let these others go. Here he again negotiates. Save the disciples so that they can carry on the work. This happened so that what they said might be fulfilled. I have not lost one of those you gave me. Then Shimon Kepha, enter Peter, who had a sword. All right, why did Peter have a sword? Did Yeshua not tell them not too long ago, gather swords? He did. But what sword was he talking about? Word, truth. And yeah, he comes up, he takes it literally, he brings a sword, he drew it, and he struck the slave of the Kohen Hagadol, cutting off his right ear. All right, let's stop there. If you're a fisherman, how proficient are you at swinging swords? Probably not very good. If he was aiming and he cut off an ear, what do you think he was really going for? Probably a head. The high priest's servant. Now, what happens if a high priest servant loses an ear or something like that? He can't hear. And you see, I mean, I teach for these moments. Such profound truth. He's not allowed to enter into the temple. So he literally took this man's job away from him. He says, listen to the guy's name. In your translation, I might say Melchias. In Hebrew, the slave's name was Melech, king. The king restores. Ish. Yeshua said to Kepha, put your sword back in its scabbard. This is the cup the Father has given me. Am I not to drink it? And he goes off from there and he gets crucified after bouncing in between a few groups of people and being interrogated. And while he's being interrogated, they find out the Jews have to bring false witnesses. The Gentiles find nothing wrong with him. He, as the Passover lamb, gets to be declared clean by the Gentile. I find nothing wrong with him, said Pontius. And the Jew, who had to bring false witness after false witness after false witness against him, was declared pure and clean, without fault, from both groups of people that he came to save. The Jew and the nations. Okay? All right. That's about all the time we have for this week. In the midst of that, from next week, you guys can look at John 18 for me. He denies Christ 3 times. And then in John 20, we find him at the tomb. All right, so read through the story, John 18, go to John 20, and then we're going to just pick up these highlight reels and we're going to summarize everything as we go. Anybody got any questions with what we've done so far? Torah says that if you're a servant, you're not allowed to have anything missing. The priest itself is not allowed to have anything missing, so there must not be anything wrong with him. Torah dictates that the person offering needs to be as perfect as the offering itself. Okay? That's one of those interesting little side notes, that Yeshua had to be both priest and offering at the same time. High priest and offering. Okay? Everybody happy? All right, prayer time is every time. You can close. Yeah.